and now today we're doing copper. I believe the tariff on copper, we're going to make it 50%.
President Trump is slapping a 50% tariff on copper imports. The announcement this week.
And Canada is one of the top suppliers of copper to the U.S., so this investigation into copper pricing could become another economic hit to Canada's economy.
In just one day, a single decision cost America over $4 billion and sparked a copper war that could reshape the entire economy. Less than 24 hours after Donald Trump signed a 50% tariff on imported copper, U.S. markets were rocked. Copper prices on the COMEX exchange exploded by 13%, reaching an all-time high of $5.95 per pound. But that was only the beginning. Canada, America's top copper supplier, hit back hard. All export contracts were frozen overnight. Mining giants like Teck Resources and Hudbay Minerals stopped shipments immediately. Ottawa sent a clear message. We won't trade with partners who change the rules on a whim. Let's break it down in today's video. Note, this video is an independent analysis based on public sources. It does not represent any organization or political stance. We encourage you to think critically and share your thoughts in the comments. Suddenly, U.S. industries, electronics, construction, automotive, were thrown into chaos. Copper, the invisible backbone of modern infrastructure, became the flashpoint of a new trade war. And now every American is paying the price through more expensive cars, homes, and power bills. So here's the burning question. What happens when tariffs meant to protect national security end up threatening the entire industrial base? Under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, Trump declared copper a strategic metal. The 50% tariff took effect August 1, 2025. It was no minor policy shift, it was a shockwave. CME copper futures jumped instantly, climbing to $5.64 to $5.69 per pound. Meanwhile, copper prices on the London Metal Exchange barely moved, or even dipped, triggering an unprecedented price gap of up to 25%. This imbalance gave rise to a new arbitrage market and exposed deep cracks in America's protectionist strategy. Canada didn't wait. It slashed its copper reliance on the U.S. and began pivoting to Asia and Europe. Considering that over half of Canada's copper exports went to the U.S. just last year, this wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. Producers like Glencore in Quebec are now rerouting supply chains, and financial experts warn that if the gap persists, America could face economic isolation not seen since the 1930s, when tariffs helped trigger a global trade collapse. Domestically, the warning signs are flashing red. The U.S. produces just over half of the refined copper it needs and imported over 810,000 tons in 2024. With smelters like ASARCO shutting down and no rapid alternative in sight, prices will rise, availability will shrink, and inflation could surge. The tariff didn't solve a problem. It created a new one: higher costs, supply shortages, and global tension. What began as a bold move on copper now threatens to choke the very systems that power America. From every electric car to every microchip, this policy is rippling through the economy, and there's no easy fix in sight. They thought Canada would fold. Instead, it rewrote the rules of the copper game. The moment Trump slapped a 50% tariff on copper, Canada didn't flinch. It struck back, armed with nearly $9.3 billion worth of annual copper exports, much of which had always flowed into the U.S. This wasn't just trade, it was power. And Canada decided to use it. Within days, major mining giants like Teck Resources and Hudbay Minerals began redirecting shipments away from the U.S. Instead of sending refined copper to American plants, they pivoted to Japan, South Korea, and China, allowing those countries to take over the refining process. Quietly and swiftly, Canada removed the U.S. from the core of its copper supply chain. Ottawa followed with a bold move. A $1.88 billion national investment plan aimed at building new export infrastructure beyond North America. This wasn't a band-aid fix. It was a blueprint to turn Canada from a raw material supplier into a global metals rival. And here's the twist. The first real strike in this trade war didn't come from Washington. It came from Ottawa. When Trump's tariffs landed, Canada didn't retaliate emotionally. It rewrote its customer map. It rerouted raw copper to Asia, where it's now refined and sold worldwide, completely bypassing the United States. This shift wasn't just about finding new buyers. It was about breaking free from U.S. control. Canada chose a path that's smarter, safer, and more globally integrated. A deliberate move that challenged the very structure of the system the U.S. thought it controlled. If Canada's investment stays on track, its copper exports to Asia will multiply, and America's share could plunge. The ripple effects? American refining plants will struggle for supply. Production costs will climb. Prices for power systems, electric vehicles, and even infrastructure will surge. And the cost? It's already hitting U.S. consumers in the wallet. Electric vehicles, for example, require about 80 kilograms of copper each. A spike in copper prices has already driven up production costs by roughly $90 per EV. Experts say this has caused millions in monthly losses for companies like Tesla and Ford. Some EV projects in the U.S. have even been paused due to copper shortages. So while Washington tried to tighten its grip, Canada quietly took control of the board. It's no longer just a player in the global copper game. It's now setting the pace. Strategic, calculated, resilient. This isn't just a trade dispute. It's a tectonic shift in global power. America's copper crisis isn't making headlines, but it's already hitting your wallet. In states like Ohio and Indiana, small manufacturers are watching their contracts vanish overnight. The price of imported copper wire has surged by 18%, pushing buyers toward cheaper suppliers in Vietnam and Thailand. These U.S. firms, many family-owned, simply can't compete. And they're not the only ones taking the hit. Utility companies across the country are now filing emergency rate hike requests. The reason? Copper-based conductors and transformer cores have jumped 22% to 25% in cost. That means higher power bills are coming, not in theory, but in your next statement. It gets worse. UBS reports the U.S. GDP could shrink by 0.5 percentage points this quarter alone. That's a $4.2 billion hit. Exactly the value of copper trade frozen when Canada stepped back as a key supplier. The fallout is spreading across sectors. Construction costs are spiking, the EV industry is slowing, and the energy sector is scrambling just to survive. For everyday Americans, the signs are already here. Utility bills are climbing. Home repairs and renovations are suddenly thousands of dollars more expensive. CBS News highlighted a warning from Ryan Young at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Copper tariffs will drive up the cost of power transmission and grid maintenance, and you will pay for it. Major automakers are also feeling the crunch. GM has already absorbed a $1.1 billion loss from earlier tariffs, and is now bracing for more damage. Companies in telecom, renewable energy, and electronics are being forced to slash profit margins, pause expansion plans, and even prepare for layoffs. The copper crisis is quietly becoming a national economic emergency. Here's the harsh reality. In 2024, the U.S. imported over half of its copper. Domestic refineries only met about 5% of demand. That gap has now grown wider thanks to a 50% tariff that's backfiring fast, tightening the market, raising prices, and leaving industries in limbo. And here's the part no one is talking about. We're running on fumes. American businesses are still surviving off old copper inventory, bought at lower prices. But once that runs out, the real costs hit. The Financial Times and The Week have both sounded the alarm. When those stockpiles dry up, businesses won't be able to shield consumers anymore. Prices will spike across the board. What started as a targeted trade policy is now rippling through every major sector. Energy, transportation, construction, and beyond. This isn't just about copper. It's about a chain reaction. One that's driving inflation, strangling production, and dragging down GDP. When Canada pulled out of the copper export chain, the U.S. didn't just lose a trade partner. It lost leverage. For decades, America dominated this supply route. Now, it's being priced out of its own system. EV prices are rising by $3,000 to $6,000 per car. Building a single home now costs $17,000 to $22,000 more, all because of copper shortages triggered by tariff policies. From home wiring to EV charging ports, copper is in everything. Yet instead of investing in stronger global partnerships and diversified supply chains, the U.S. is retreating behind a wall of tariffs, unstable, short-sighted, and costly. Is this the great deal we were promised? Or is it a dangerous misstep that's cutting us off from the global supply networks we helped build? This $4.2 billion shock could be just the beginning, a preview of a future where America no longer drives global trade, but is forced to react to it. What do you think? Are we entering a new economic era where America is no longer at the center? Let me know below. This was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. Digital Garage has so much more in store.